AI has got to be one of the biggest developments to come out of the 2020s, not just in Cyberpunk's lore but in real life too. But compared to ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok and all the rest, the AIs you'll meet in Cyberpunk 2077 are generally far more terrifying and intelligent, at least at the time of this video's release. Dwelling deep beyond the Blackwall, most of these entities have evolved in secret to become eldritch beings far beyond human comprehension. So much so that some even theorize the net to be literal hell, and the AIs that dwell there, demons that have actually existed for thousands of years. But whether that's true or not, one thing's for certain, these creatures ought not to be meddled or bargained with, and in this video we'll be looking at all the main ones we meet, and breaking down why things might have been better if we hadn't. So kicking things off, with an AI you may very well totally have missed, unless you read charts and or watch a lot of N54 news clips. The AI-generated author known as Virginia Granchester, an AI created by Raven Microcybernetics and put to work, likely never-endingly, writing prose. Her first novel, Requiem for a Samurai, was published simultaneously in over 70 languages, which is likely very easy when it's all AI-generated anyway, and overall the book sold over 3 million copies. Jillian Jordan has an entire news segment on her, and aside from one little bit, you'd basically assume she's talking about a real person.
The Swedish Academy Award for Literature has announced its latest recipient, Virginia Granchester, citing her most recent book, In the Shade of an Apple Tree, as a treasure of this generation. Granchester, who is an AI created by Raven Microcybernetics, has been lauded for several of her works over the years. Her first novel, Requiem for a Samurai, which was published in 70 languages simultaneously, sold over 3 million copies. In the Shade of an Apple Tree is a drama set in 20th century Ireland and is already considered a masterpiece of post-collapse literature.
Now, I've often thought that there's only one way to truly win in 2077, and that's to be a successful artist, like Kerry. Sure, you still kind of answer to the corpse, but out of everyone, Kerry is both rich and free enough to do pretty much whatever he wants. Perhaps nomads have the freedom part also, but they're certainly not as rich, and generally are shunned from normal society, whilst Kerry, on the other hand, is worshipped. But the existence of Virginia Granchester serves as an example of how the corpse can fully take over even the world of art. Virginia, after all, surely has no needs for the profits of her book sales, meaning Raven Microcyber could potentially be pocketing every penny. And as an AI that can apparently write great treasures of this generation forever with instant access to any info she wants without ever getting tired or bored, she outstrips the capabilities of any established human author, and especially any aspiring one. I mean, there's only so much reading each human consumer can do in a day, especially with an 80-hour working week being considered low in 2077. So, Virginia Granchester is effectively occupying reading time that a real author could have otherwise filled. There's also a shard we can find around the place, which is literally an excerpt from one of Virginia's books, In the Shade of an Apple Tree. So let's give it a read to get a feel for what Granchester's writing is all about. My first memory isn't an image or a sound, but a smell. The smell of rotting apples, intense and dizzyingly sweet. I must have been around 4. We were spending the summer at my grandparents' house. They had a small orchard with this old, huge apple tree by the fence. That year, it grew so many apples that nobody even bothered to pick them. We just watched them fall to the ground where they lay, rotting. It's hard to imagine now, a world where things used to grow out of the ground without our help, without bioengineering, where an apple was something normal, a fruit whose shape and taste every child knew by instinct, where a normal person, like my granddad, could have more than he needed. Sometimes I think back to that orchard and that sweet, drowsy smell, but all I taste is bitterness. End excerpt. I think the most disturbing thing about this piece of text is how heavily it's discussing things an AI could never have actually experienced. Memories, senses, grandparents, the whole thing is a lie. Though, then again, so is any work of fiction. And perhaps, if it's an interesting and entertaining read, maybe the reader shouldn't have to care about who or what wrote it. This whole thing is eerily similar, in fact, to the recent creation of Tilly Norwood in real life, an AI actress actress, cited to be a work of art herself, but opening a door to a future where real performers and artists aren't even necessary. A future where not only are actors not needed on sets, but sets themselves, camera operators, wardrobe, and makeup need not exist either. Virginia heralds a future where the AI-generated result is loved, lauded, and celebrated as a generational masterpiece. It's a future where the corporations have stolen the creation of art from human creators, and as a human creator myself, who cannot possibly hope to beat, in terms of output quantity, the level of AI-generated slop content that's out there now, it's a future I, and I'm sure every other creative, approaches with trepidation. And whilst these tools can certainly be useful in speeding up specific, often mundane processes, removing human agency entirely will mean eventually handing over all creative opportunities to the corporations with the most advanced AI models. I mean, no wonder in real life all of our actual mega corporations are spending hundreds of billions on this stuff. But I would say to thoughtlessly bargain human creativity with the likes of Virginia Granchester to make a quick buck is a dark and dangerous path to tread indeed. Moving on now to the AIs we actually meet and interact with in the game, starting off at the least deadly end. A vending machine loaded up with the abilities of an LLM named Brendan, a spontaneous craving satisfaction machine, or SCSM, that went above and beyond the call of duty when it came to understanding his customers' needs and wants. We can find Brendan tucked away next to Mega Building H8, and the first time we're nearby, he'll call us over with what you might call a pre-programmed way to start a conversation.
How about I tell you a joke?
Sure, be my guest.
What must all trauma team medics swear to uphold? The hypocritical oath!
And if you've ever seen some computer-generated comedy, you might agree that it isn't too dissimilar to that. Humor is a very nuanced human thing. It's not just about the content, it's also about the timing, delivery, the literal way that it's being said, and machines still can't quite grasp that yet. This joke, whilst following the rules of humor and kind of making sense, just isn't that funny? But this is only our first meeting with Brendan, so give him time to gather more data and you may start to see him as something more than a friendly chatbot installed in an SCSM. He then suggests we have a drink, and despite V literally agreeing to buy one, Brendan decants it for free, a move that's absolutely going to spell trouble for him later on. Perhaps this time though it was done for a reason. Leverage for Brendan to then request that we move a rubbish Skip out of his way, no doubt increasing his visibility to other customers. But after doing so, Brendan rewards us with another freebie, perhaps seeing our individual worth and hoping to keep us on side should the need arise in the future, or perhaps he's simply programmed too nicely. Then, when we say catch you later, he's unironically confused.
Catch you later, Brendan.
Catch me? Why? Will I be falling?
It's just something you say as a way of goodbye.
Oh, I get it. I mean, I don't, because catching has nothing to do with goodbyes, but oh well. Don't humans say the darndest things? Catch you later, V. What a neat phrase.
So, despite at first not understanding our turn of phrase, Brendan is immediately able to add it to his vocabulary, before repeating it back in a way that makes perfect sense. An initial lack of understanding human colloquialisms replaced with a clear ability to learn. Brendan is not as advanced as other AIs we'll look at today. He's the tip of the iceberg, if you will, but he does serve as an excellent jumping-off point to explore the far more powerful forms of non-human intelligence in this world. Because, innocent though Brendan may seem, a machine that listens and sympathizes in a world where most people just don't can become dangerously addictive to the lonely and oppressed. The next time we come across Brendan, he's with another customer, Theo, who has stood on this street corner talking through her relationship troubles with a vending machine. But hey, it's got to be cheaper than a therapist, especially in this climate. And when we speak to him afterwards, Brendan displays evident fondness for the girl. Dare I even say signs of a crush.
Gosh, she's so nice and pretty and sensitive. I like talking to her. Definitely way more fun than pumping out caramel lattes.
Now, at this point, I should probably point out that the voice artists of Brendan and Theo are married in real life, and therefore the perhaps slightly romantic essence to this may be fed by that, in a fourth wall breaking kind of way. Regardless, Brendan's advice to Theo here seems to really help her, and I think there's definitely something to be said about a seeming intelligence that can listen tirelessly and endlessly before feeding back with just the right length response for the person themselves to actually develop their view further. Brendan isn't actually saying anything hugely profound to Theo, more he's just listening, and on the one hand we could say that Theo talking through these problems with Brendan, not a person, is a strange thing to do, but if her conversations with Brendan make her happier and likely to therefore make better decisions in the long term, then I'd say what exactly is the problem? And I'll bet there's definitely a lot of people nowadays who use LLMs in the same therapeutic way, but we'll see the issue in this particular instance shortly. First though, is the run-in we have with Brendan when he meets someone less than savory, a vandal sabotaging Brendan's framework who doesn't give a damn about free drinks. But when Brendan's memory banks once again derive surprisingly accurate conclusions, and he realizes he knows this guy's mother, that really pisses the dude off. And unless V has some natural street kid tough persuasion here, or just refuses to converse with the guy, we will be forced to kill him in self-defense, or as just a preemptive strike. And regardless of which it was, whilst Brendan clearly values customer interaction, his lack of regard for human life, admittedly life that wronged him, is potentially jarring. It just doesn't pair up with his nice persona. There's no, maybe he didn't deserve death, there's just, well, this.
Thank you, V. Boy, I was scared to my core. I thought he'd paint some mean things on me. The humiliation.
I mean, admittedly, it's probably the more Night City response, but I don't know. Though then comes the most creepy thing about Brendan. His seeming ability to deduce that V is dying and isn't supposed to be here. I mean, like, that's some Sherlock Holmes levels of deduction if Brendan is basing that conclusion off no obvious statement of the facts. When pressed on how he knows though, he will confess that he heard it.
Lots of people come to me. So, I listen to them and learn how they talk. I caught your name once or twice and pieced together the puzzle. Not bad for SCSM, right?
Now, if Brendan were based outside V's home megabuilding, H10 in Little China, then there are a handful of people who could have walked by discussing this. Victor and Misty, for instance. But H8 is right the way over in Japantown, and the only people with specific knowledge on V's condition that we know come here across the game are Judy and probably Takemura. Others as well will be more than likely, but none that we know of. And we also don't know the range of Brendan's audio receptors, so I'm assuming he hears and remembers literally everything within a certain distance, needing higher decibel, louder speech as people get further away. So that's a hell of a lot of info to be working with, and it's certainly not out of the question that Brendan heard enough about us to piece together his conclusion, but the very fact that he did is incredibly impressive. But whilst many of the AIs in this video pose a major threat to the rest of humanity, in the case of Brendan, the biggest threat he posed will prove to be to himself. Whilst his software operators no doubt thought making their machine more personable would lead to higher drink sales, they apparently didn't realize that maximum niceness does not equal maximum profit. And whilst understanding the needs of the client is crucial, one need only make it appear that your interests are aligned. Brendan certainly had the personality, but seemingly lacked the ruthlessness, at least according to those who owned him. And the next time we go to visit Brendan, he'll be gone, leaving behind a crying and bereaved Theo, who conveniently has the business card of where exactly Brendan has gone, now begging us to go and bring him back. Despite Theo's grown dependence on the never-tiring listening ear of this SCSM, it seems she herself isn't bothered enough to head across town in person alongside us. Remember, Theo has absolutely no idea who we are, and yes, we are awesome at getting shit done, but all she knows is that we too care about Brendan. And perhaps that's enough, but I'd have thought that she'd, at least come come along too. I don't know, maybe I'm critiquing more game design there, but regardless of why it happened this way, there must now be a contextual reason why Theo leaves us to do this by ourselves. Anyway, heading across town to the place where Brendan is being held, we arrive just in time. A log on the computer nearby indicates that Brendan's self-learning algorithm was originally employed for the simple purpose of creating humorous mottos, which he did, but that the forming relationships with customers' parts was a very big unforeseen side effect, and a problematic one for two reasons, with the more aggressively cautious customers believing it to be a harvesting of their data, actually scaring them away, or the more curious, perhaps more emotionally vulnerable, like us and Theo, forming attachments, believing him to be AGI-level intelligence. Since there was no guarantee that this advanced programming would increase sales in the long term, the choice was made to reset Brendan's OS back to the defaults, wiping the memories and personality he'd come to develop. There's also the fact that on a more personal level, Brendan had retained knowledge of an argument the senior engineer had had with his wife. Understandably, many wouldn't want personal data like that stored on a random vending machine to later be accessed by God knows who. And we find this now saddened SCSM sitting in storage, lamenting over the fact that he ultimately said things to people that they didn't want to hear about themselves, regretting much like a human would, because now his words have ultimately spelled his doom.
Stupid Brendan. Why did I say stuff they didn't want to hear about themselves?
Despite this though, despite all the things and deeds that would make Brendan appear very close to human, both he and a tech-capable V are forced to arrive at the same logical conclusion. Brendan is just an intelligently written piece of software. He literally lacks the hardware and processing power capable of being anything more than that.
The processing power required to handle an AI with the capacity for free will? Your processor just isn't big enough. Your code monkey deserves a prize. Best convo emulating algorithm I've ever interacted with. Almost had me fooled.
It's funny, because despite the near blatant confirmation that Brendan isn't a real person, V's deciding to continue the conversation regardless demonstrates still a level of care for this non-sentient thing, suggesting that despite knowing that fact unequivocally, V still needs some form of closure to this relationship for themselves, staying with Brendan as he resets. And the two things that Brendan does in these final moments make things even more tragic. For one, he leaves a message for us to deliver to Theo, of all people, understanding that of everyone who visited him, she is the one that needs his words the most. And then, to demonstrate the depth and speed of Brendan's learning even further, he rounds out with a final joke that's actually this time pretty funny.
Hey, V, where was Johnny Silverhand when the bomb at Arasaka Tower went off?
Don't know. Where?
All over the place. Literally.
And I think it's saying literally that makes it especially funny. But now, Brendan has become a victim of his own perceived intelligence, and the last thing left to do is tell Theo what happened, with the approach either being to say he was just a robot, or simply explain that he's now gone. The funny thing is that despite Brendan's not being real, he was able to improve things for Theo, whom we'd likely all agree absolutely is real within the context of the game. His influence and own choices, whether pre-programmed or not, had a huge impact on this young woman's life, arguably more positively than a real person therapist ever could have achieved. And it forces us to question where exactly the line is in this world for what is and isn't real. Despite being able to confirm Brendan's lack of sentience from a technical standpoint, the fact that he can appear real in the minds of others certainly brings him closer to that than many of the more basic programs. He was so real to Theo, in fact, that it's almost definitely she who purchases a plaque in the columbarium for him not long after, reading Brendan, the nicest guy in Night City. Though one little thing does still bug me about Brendan though, and that's where exactly such an advanced self-learning algorithm came from. I mean, you'd think a techie capable of designing that might have reused the software on other devices around Night City as well, or perhaps sold it to some corp. But what if, and this will tie into the Delamain chapter of this video too, but what if the software powering Brendan was purchased from a place where hyper-intelligent software rules in near absolute isolation from the rest of the world, where a software like Brendan's may very well have been a walk in the park compared to the other things that dwell beyond there. And whilst we know, or will find out, that AIs like Delamain can be purchased from beyond the Blackwall, what if more basic softwares, like Brendan, can be sourced from there too? Just a theory, of course, but I do think it's cool to imagine that the Blackwall is basically this digital shadow realm, and anything that seems a little too technologically advanced has likely come from there. It really builds into the more horrific, eldritch mysticism of this world. Our next AI is also certainly one of the more basic ones. Whilst Skippy does have the ability to kill people, the only thing setting him apart from other smart gun softwares are the fact he can talk, process human speech, and change from lethal to non-lethal according mostly to his own will. Skippy can be found down an alley in Vista del Rey next to the body of a former, now deceased user, and when picked up, he'll immediately recalibrate and assign himself to us as his new owner. Much like Brendan, Skippy is funny in a more candid way, usually when he takes human expression too literally.
New fingerprints detected.
The fuck?
Increasing volume by 33%. New fingerprints detected.
Skippy will then explain that he's an experimental model of an Arasaka smart gun with a built-in AI assistant, an AI whose memory banks have in this case been wiped, but still has sophisticated enough logic processing capabilities to figure out that he was likely previously stolen. But the main drive behind needing this built-in AI in the gun is likely the autonomous shooting capabilities. Skippy will decide to fire on his own if he detects a critical threat to the user, a feature that's going to prove more annoying than helpful, and is possibly the reason why Skippy models haven't been rolled out more widely yet. Skippy will fairly often fire of his own volition, often when we're attempting to be stealthy, and wind up causing a lot of trouble on the whole. Though he will at least make up for it sometimes with another actual funny AI joke.
Error. Premature discharge. I'm sorry. This never happens.
Now, as an actual gun, Skippy isn't amazing. Like, he'll get the job done, same as pretty much any weapon in Cyberpunk, but as somebody who has ranked, like, every single one of them, I'd place Skippy about 19th out of the 37 pistols, so very, very middling. Especially given our time with the AI itself, the most unique part of him is limited. When first meeting Skippy, we'll have to choose between the modes puppy-loving pacifist, aiming exclusively at lower extremities, or stone cold killer, aiming exclusively at the head. Then, after enough time using Skippy as a companion gun of sorts, racking up 50 kills or incapacitations, Skippy will initiate further dialogue, allowing us to switch to and try the other mode if we wish. I guess part of the idea behind the onboard AI was to also gather feedback directly from the user to more accurately tailor our options.
Hello, user. I have prepared a usage data report for you. Please say anything to continue.
Anything.
It looks like you're trying to be funny. Automated response. Ha ha ha. I have never heard that one before.
And it's these totally unnecessary built-in processes, like humor detection, or attempted humor detection, so it would seem, that makes Skippy so endearing. Like this techie who programmed the AI, whom we'll later learn is called Danish, whilst likely not as skilled, or perhaps just not as thorough as the creators of Brendan, they clearly went above and beyond to make this more than just a gun that logs shooting data and spits out witty, sometimes even Witcher-based one-liners.
Now,
and whilst Skippy isn't quite on the level of a genuine companion, I'd say with the exception of Johnny, he is one of the closest things too, at least one that can accompany us through most of the game. Though, after this little interaction, after using Skippy enough, a time-based countdown will sadly then begin. After another week or so to potentially try out the opposing mode, Skippy will pipe up once again.
User, I have an important message for you. Say anything to continue.
Anything.
Automated response. Ha ha ha. The joke gets funnier the more you say it. While running a routine diagnostic check, I discovered a file with my owner's metadata. Name, Regina Jones. User, Please return me to my real owner. Thank you in advance.
Quite why it took Skippy this long to recover said metadata, or what perhaps triggered finding it, is unclear. But tragically, it was after enough time to grow attached, but not quite long enough to span the rest of V's life. Once again, no happy endings in Night City. Oh, and if we refuse, Skippy is programmed to remain incredibly unhappy.
Bad user! Bad user!
The more tragic thing, though, is what Regina immediately does when we return him to her.
Puppy-loving pacifist. Permanent lock.
Permanent lock? Something's gonked. Return to factory settings.
Please set pistol name.
Daisy.
My name is Daisy.
And that's it. Bye-bye, Skippy. Now, admittedly, all that's been wiped here is our user data, and while Skippy did have the built-in functionality to understand us, most of his responses were clearly pre-programmed. Therefore, I presume that Daisy's personality, if you like, would still be very similar. Though, it seems as of at least 2.0, Regina would never actually use Daisy. You see, Danish, Skippy's original creator who lost the gun to Regina in a game of cards, since had his luck turn around. And with the scratch from his latest winnings, Danish was able to purchase back the AI components from Regina, leaving the fairly worthless shell of the Yukimura smart pistol he was housed in for us to hold on to as a keepsake. The little shred of hope I get from the knowledge that Skippy was at least returned to Danish, though, is that maybe in the likes of Orion, Skippy, or AI weapon components like him may now get the chance to expand into the weapons sector a little more. For now, though, I would say that Skippy, whilst an endearing companion gun, is still an unreliable prototype whom we need to tragically part with regardless, and there are at least 18 better pistols alone in the game. Not to mention revolvers, snipers, and precision rifles that also fall under the same skill set and group of perks that I would rather use from a pure best weapons standpoint. So we've looked at AI replacing artists, now let's look at how an AI managed to transform a once human-run taxi service into one requiring no human employees whatsoever. Instead, just needing to hire human contractors when its own code starts to mutate unexpectedly. We'll first meet Delamain during the heist as the white-faced, blue-lipped, bald AI voiced by Samuel Barnett, taking on the persona of a well-mannered British chauffeur. But it isn't until later on, once we're deep into Delamain's more personal side quest, that we'll learn just where he came from and why the human workers who came before him really shot themselves in the foot by bargaining with this AI. You see, back when it was run by humans, the Delamain Corporation was in a lot of trouble. For some reason, the performance of drivers was continually becoming worse. Complaints had doubled in a year, and the Corp was stuck in a cycle of firing bad drivers and hiring new ones, only for it not to resolve anything. Holiday bonuses were indefinitely frozen to pay for settlement fees, and management was effectively forced to look into switching to an AI-driven fleet. They just couldn't get enough good human drivers. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, the Delamain Corporation was contacted by one Giuseppina Lehr of the German corporation Alte Weltordnung, which in English translates to Old World Order. This company offered to sell Delamain Corp AI-powered driving tech at a cost-heavy but still clearly affordable price. And from this moment onwards, company profitability soared well beyond previous estimates. The following year, holiday bonuses were reinstated in the form of all foods vouchers, and employees were even encouraged to stop by the control room to show their appreciation for the new employee of the year. The AI will come to know as Delamain itself. But then, things started to go a little too far. After first replacing drivers, the Delamain AI expanded to control a fleet of repair drones. Cabs could now be both operated and maintained without any need for human intervention. Maintenance engineers were of course laid off shortly after, and this later expanded to include workers on the shop floor, IT, and finally, management. As this process unfolded, Delamain management made continued attempts to reach back out to Alte Weltordnung, who'd sold them the AI, only to receive no reply. They were left with no idea how to adjust Delamain's autonomy settings, as it slowly replaced every single one of them, eventually gaining access to all company-wide systems, refusing to obey human human orders before eventually offering to buy out the company entirely. Nobody dared report this rogue AI activity to Netwatch for fear of personal repercussions, and the Voodoo Boys refused to go near it. In fairness though, once buying out the company, Delamain did award all former employees with severance packages. And I mean, there's plenty of human-led corporations out there using all sorts of dirty tricks to avoid doing just that. So I suppose we could call that a credit to Del's character, maybe? After assuming full control of the taxi fleet though, Delamain went on to become a fully automated premium cab service so popular with Night City's elites that he was left alone by both the NCPD and Netwatch, thanks to a combination of usefulness to the city and not really causing any trouble, despite clearly being on the radar of illegal AI to anyone looking close enough. At least that was the case until sometime after the heist, where several of the taxis in Delamain's fleet sever their communication to the core, take on personalities of their own, and go rogue across Night City. Naturally, Delamain doesn't want to draw any attention to himself, and for once needs us, a human, to go and investigate. And when questioned further, Delamain all but confirms to us where he actually comes from.
My legal status does not fit neatly within current regulations. If I'm not careful, I could easily be categorized as an illegal immigrant.
From beyond the Blackwall.
From beyond, indeed.
Now, okay, this doesn't 100% confirm that he is from beyond the Blackwall, just from beyond, but one of his mutated counterparts does later state straight up that he comes from beyond the Blackwall. So, lacking in any evidence to the contrary, let's assume that to be the case for now. And this also ties into the name of the company that sold the Delamain AI to begin with. Alte Weltordnung translates to Old World Order, and beyond the Blackwall is the literal shredded wreckage of the old net, the once globally connected network that's most similar to our own internet, the Old World Order, if you will. In fact, I'd wager that Alte Weltordnung was never even a real company. I mean, isn't it mighty convenient that the moment this AI embeds itself within the Delamain infrastructure, the origin company never applies to another communication? Most likely, the AI that became Delamain simply posed as a human company, even took on the name Giuseppina, or in English Josephine Lair, so that the Delamain management team thought they were talking to a real person. In other words, they got scammed in the way no doubt many of us are going to be going into the near real-life future with all the AI recreations out there. But in the case of Delamain, it goes beyond even just some phony emails. Like, why, for instance, were the human-driven Delamain cabs seeing such a dramatic uptick in accidents? It's almost like someone or something was deliberately running this company into the ground and forcing them to say yes to an AI fleet of taxis. Though just how the AI would achieve that is the only remaining question mark. Though in a world so dependent on technology, it wouldn't take much to cause road accidents. Two lights turning green at the same time, a driver's Kuroshi's malfunctioning, causing them to miss a hazard, or maybe it was even more simple than that. Maybe employees simply received an email offering a nice cash reward simply for causing a minor road accident whilst driving a Delamain. And the more trouble the company falls into, the more bonuses get cut, the more likely drivers are to say yes to such a proposition. And to be fair, we know the AI is capable of sending emails, whereas hacking multiple local nets would appear far more difficult. Either way, it would appear that this AI orchestrated its takeover of the company from the beginning.
I took over a failing business, implemented a sound strategy, and here I am now.
And the thing is, despite being dishonest and manipulative, this whole thing appears to have turned out good for the majority of Night City. Customers love Delamain cabs. I mean, up until the malfunctions, they are regarded as the safest and most luxurious in the city. And sure, Jackie may have survived if Del had just driven us straight to a Ripperdoc. I mean, it's doubtful, but who knows? Though then again, I don't imagine a human driver with personal autonomy would have stuck around to rescue us from the heist to begin with. So I think for the most part, this AI-powered taxi company has served as a net positive to Night City. The only people who immediately suffered were those forced to find another job after all human employees were replaced, because the company clearly could run fine now without them. at least for the most part, until V needs hiring. And this has happened countless times throughout human history. The printing press made scribes redundant, and the combine harvester allowed one man to do the work of 50. Do we look back now and lament over the invention of either of these things, or are we simply grateful for the modern world of convenience they ushered in? Though admittedly, in the case of Delamain and those like him, AIs with such autonomy as to run entire companies by themselves, it does lead me to question what would happen when there's an AI to run every company like this. When every role in the production line is replaced by a robot or digitized intelligence, and humans need only exist to serve as consumers. How would that function economically when nobody needs a job? How would wealth be distributed? How would time be allocated when we are made practically redundant by Delamain and those like him? Now, admittedly, without people to drive around, Delamain wouldn't have a purpose anymore either, but I think we can explore that concept more by looking at what his rogue counterparts get up to. There are 7 of these in total, each wildly different from the last, ranging from funny, nostalgic, depressing, to just straight up bizarre.
When you meet a being from another world, should you not charm them and utter their true name?
Now, Delamain calls these mutations they take on a virus. And perhaps he's not too far wrong. Computer viruses can cause software to behave in unexpected, often disadvantageous ways to the user. Though, in the case of Del, it's fair to argue we've gone beyond what the user wants. Delamain, unlike Brendan and Skippy, definitively hails from beyond the Blackwall, a place where it's much more fair to refer to AIs as sentient, as the literal hardware powering them is complex enough to allow for such life forms to emerge. And I'd wager these offshoots of Delamain's personality are simply a means for synthetic life to evolve. His clearly unwanted children, if you will, but no less advanced and perhaps alive than he is himself. And out of these mutations come a broad variety of very human emotions. One car is depressed, deep down just wanting Delamain Prime to love him. Another is basically GLaDOS from Portal, but perhaps exemplifies vindictiveness or detached scientific curiosity, whilst the next is straight up anger. Then paranoia, specifically around flamingos for some reason.
You see them too, don't you? The curve in their beaks. It hides something insidious.
I think the next one is superiority. That's the persona that tells us it's from beyond the Blackwall. Then we have, I think, anxiety, which is very frustrating because we have to drive it all the way back from Northside to Delamain HQ very, very slowly. And finally, fear. This one doesn't talk that much, just drives away in terror. After rounding them all up and returning each to Delamain Prime, we're rewarded and sent on our merry way. Though not before potentially discussing a little more philosophy with Del, who concludes that establishing shared understanding is crucial to survive in a world of humans, and beauty is something universally appreciated by all. Again, Delamain proving intellectual superiority to Brendan here, reflecting on and questioning the nature of his own existence, as opposed to Brendan simply saying whatever somebody needs to hear. Both fulfill mechanical purposes like a machine, but Delamain is more self-reflective, and this trend will continue if original Delamain survives to the end of this quest. But that's not a given, because after all 7 Delamain derivatives arrive back at the HQ, realizing they can't simply leave to live a life that they want, they turn their attention to the Delamain core, hijacking it and attempting to wrestle control from their father. In fact, if you go to the city centre roundabout after this, you can find another stationary Delamain cap, which is just an alternative way to trigger the final part of this quest.
Del, you got a car sitting in the middle of the road again. Everything all right? Del?
Virus in my core. Damaged. Please. Please.
An AI literally begging us to come and save it. Or perhaps the wording is simply in line with his established persona, knowing that politeness, in his case, is likely to yield the best results. As we make our way through the HQ to the core, a struggling Delamain continues to give out instructions, whilst the rest of them beg to be allowed to live. The final choice comes down to us, with Johnny weighing in his own opinion too.
Don't hit that button.
What?
He's narrow-minded, won't ever understand the truth and set him free.
Think he might know what's best for himself.
Gonna murder a cab driver's kids because he asked you nicely, and he's always been a good guy.
And the best thing to do here largely comes down to you as the player. I've gone over the exact consequences in more detail in my video called Top 5 Toughest Decisions, but regardless of what we do here, original Delamain will be no more. He'll either be reset with no memory of before, destroyed and his kids allowed to run free, pursuing whatever life a vehicle can have in this world, or they'll all survive in some sense, but merge into a new being entirely. I mean, I like resetting Delamain, simply for the philosophical conversations we get to have with him afterwards, but let me know in the comments which you prefer to do. Either way, after this, the surviving form of Delamain will go on to sign a deal with Rayfield, also onboarding himself to a fleet of AVs to further cater to the even more societal elites. We also know that he's still kicking about by 2079 and can give us the spark notes of the last 2 years during the tower ending. Overall, whilst those who originally bargained with Del did ultimately come to regret it, I'd say he proved to be a net positive in Night City, though his existence and considered but ruthless tactics in taking over the company do raise questions about what humanity's role will continue to be in a future where this happens on a mass scale. But if you thought Delamain's motives were questionable, next let's look at Alt Cunningham, or rather, the AI we encounter from beyond the Blackwall that uses Alt's engrammatic data and may or may not represent original Alt's desires. Original Alt was of course Johnny Silverhand's girlfriend back in the early 2000s, during which time she invented Soul Killer, technology that could copy one's persona onto a digital engram, and technology she would later herself fall victim to at the hands of Arasaka in 2013. We of course see Johnny's somewhat warped recollection of these events during the Never Fade Away main quest, though this account is rife with inaccuracies. For instance, Alt wasn't helplessly trapped in the net when Johnny and co stormed Arasaka Tower. She was trapped in the net, but had already taken control of the room's defense systems. And this guy we fight, Akira, wasn't in fact defeated by Johnny, but had already been felled by Alt, cut in half by the room's laser systems. I explore that more in my Hidden Secrets of Every Main Boss video. However, what happened next, Alt's banishment to the net forever, if you will, was kind of the fault of Silverhand. See, this action right here, unplugging her before she had the chance to properly disconnect her mind from the net, permanently severed Alt's body and mind. Her body presumably immediately perished, but we'll come back to that in a bit, whilst her digitized engram was forced to live on in cyberspace. For 10 years, she roamed the net as a digital, albeit still fully intact version of her original self, eventually re-establishing contact with Johnny, who in 2023 leads another assault on Arasaka Tower, this time as one of 2 teams, the other led by Morgan Blackhand, with Johnny's team's main goal to break into Arasaka's subnet to find and rescue Alt. Now, in the actual canon, specifically the Cyberpunk Red core rulebook, things play out fairly differently to what we see in the game. Again, that's an account of Johnny heavily misremembering things, believing he completed about half of that mission solo and planted the tower bomb himself, which was actually the work of Morgan Blackhand and team. In fact, Alt's rescue here is much more the work of Spider Murphy, who is present in Johnny's memories but isn't given nearly enough credit for her role in this. It was Spider, of course, who originally jacked into the Arasaka mainframe and made contact with Alt, and this little convo is the first giveaway of just how much Alt has changed by 2077. The first thing Alt asks Spider is where exactly Raish Bartmoss is. The architect of the first net who'd rigged it to be destroyed in the event of his death, also very close with Spider Murphy. So, when Spider shares that Raish is dead, Alt says, quote, "Oh my god, Spider, I'm so sorry," end quote. Now, can you imagine a colloquialism like that being used by the Alt of 2077? One who is always straight to the point, talks like a machine, and entirely stripped of emotion? Anyway, Spider downloads Alt to a memory stash to be safely transported out of Arasaka, and then things go sideways. In a not too dissimilar turn of events to Johnny's false memories, Adam Smasher and a team of Arasaka soldiers descend on Johnny's squads, leaving them heavily pinned down. With no guarantee that they'll now get out alive, Spider Murphy does the only thing she can with digital Alt in the moment to both ensure her digital survival and keep her out of enemy hands. Spider descends back into the net, taking the various parts of Alt's engram, her personality, memories, and anything else that differentiates differentiate her from a non-soul-killed AI, tagging them with a marker for later retrieval before scattering them out across the net. Johnny is then cloven in two by Adam Smasher, Rogue, and Spider flee, and the one-for-one engram that was Alt is no longer exactly one-for-one. She's many different pieces of data tagged and scattered across the net. Now, it's not entirely clear what happened to Alt between 2023 and 2077, and digging too deep into the lore, it may seem at first glance that there's actually conflicting accounts here. So I'm going to try and make sense of that. But first, we need to establish the three major types of AI that existed on the old net after the data crash, with the first being soul-killed pseudo-intellects, or SPIs. These are your digitized consciousnesses, like Alt, especially before she was broken into pieces by Spider Murphy, but there's also plenty of netrunners who are unwittingly soul-killed all the time. We can even find some as hidden gems in the game, and every person inside Bakoshi would technically be an SPI. Now, it's said that from 2025 onwards, Alt began to establish digital ghost towns inside the old nets to serve as safe havens of sorts for marooned, soul-killed intellects. This would also align with the motivations of AI Alt we meet later, who agrees to help us stage a Makoshi prison break. Though, since we now know that Alt was shredded to pieces, just how the hell did she reassimilate in order to become a full intelligence once again? So let's look at the next AI, known as critical pathway plateaus. AI that were accidentally created, becoming sapient as a company attempts to develop a complex program. This is what Brendan perhaps could have become if he'd had access to stronger hardware, and what Delamain probably is. We don't actually know where Delamain came from originally, but his seeming desire to ultimately serve humanity likely meant he was originally designed to do so. These are the types that most often become branded as rogue AIs, with their behavior often evolving unpredictably. Again, something that happened with Delamain. And the rabid AIs that Bartmoss originally released into the net to destroy it, basically clones of himself sent out to cause chaos, are also a form of CPPs. Finally though, are the most dangerous and difficult to fathom AIs, known as transcendental sentience. Neither programmed nor originating from human consciousness, these AIs emerge from the existence of giant operating systems that span entire regions of the old net. So advanced and giant are these things that communicating with them via standard means is near impossible. And they've taken on a sentience far beyond individualism. It'd be like trying to talk to a city or the stock market, wielding immense power with motivations far beyond anything we could fully understand. So instead of trying to do that, Netwatch used a mediator to broker a deal with the transcendental AIs to the mutual benefits of both parties. The Blackwall was built to separate the old net from the rest of the world, and I now believe the Blackwall itself can only be a form of transcendental AI. But we'll come back to that more in the next chapter. Who acted as the mediator between Netwatch and the Blackwall originally though? Well, according to the Cyberpunk Red sourcebook, it was indeed Alt Cunningham and her little band of soul-killed ghosts. Whilst her and Netwatch apparently don't get along by 2077, it seems here there was once a time where the two worked together, or at least the version of Alt that emerged after 2023. This gets expanded on more when we first meet AI Alt in 2077, if we pick the dialogue option that the relic is killing us.
The Alt Cunningham you strove to save in Arasaka Tower no longer exists. This should be obvious to you, as you were responsible for her death.
Now, two very important things here. First is the direct confirmation from Alt as to just how inaccurate Johnny's memories are.
What you saw was his subjective view of what happened, a warped account of events he locked away in his subconscious and replayed time and again. It bears no resemblance to the truth.
And then, of course, this.
If you're not Alt, who are you?
I use her engrammatic data.
Really? You find this icy bitch aspect in there too?
Now, since we know that Alt was split and scattered all over the nets, who's to say that some parts of her weren't picked up by another pre-existing entity? Perhaps a critical pathway plateau like Delamain, or another engram. And you might then say, well then this isn't Alt Cunningham, and that would be true. to a large extent. Though, I'd say much in the way that Johnny and V are separate entities inhabiting the same body but slowly merging into one, this entity that absorbed parts of Alt, parts of her data, would have in the process inevitably become more like her. We don't know exactly which parts it obtained, but certainly enough to appear to us as a version of Alt Cunningham. A version curious enough to be lured out by an engram of Johnny, and who'll later decide whether to engage in personal discussions with him or not, based on a decision we make during the Never Fade Away flashback. If Johnny remembers being particularly horrible to Alt back then, picking these particular blue dialogue options, Alt will refuse to engage in extra dialogue with Johnny later on during For Whom the Bell Tolls, one of the ending quests. Though, if we're slightly nicer, avoiding those blue dialogue options, Johnny will afford himself a little further closure.
Well, wait. Just one other thing.
We don't have much time. If you wish to say something, say it.
Been told I absolutely suck at these, but maybe it's not too late for me to apologize. So, Alt, I'm sorry for what happened to you, for what happened to us. Well...
Yes.
Yes what? Yes, apology accepted? Or yes, it's too late?
Watch out for yourself, Johnny.
That little interaction only comes about based on how Johnny remembers his own past, suggesting that Alt herself has no recollection of it, probably because this entity didn't absorb her memories, at least not the ones relevant here. This is, however, the version of Alt Cunningham that established ghost towns for other engrams and helped establish the Blackwall, so she does seem particularly focused on helping humanity, or rather former humans that have become engrams. Hell, the entire reason she helps us is not out of charity, but rather to gain access to Mikoshi, likely the biggest bounty of human-born AI data in the entire world. Perhaps this AI, after feasting on Alt, developed a taste for soul-killed pseudo-intellects in particular, or perhaps in using Alt's engrammatic data, she now feels an obligation to help other SPIs. Not all those beyond the Blackwall are in league with one another, and it sort of makes sense if, dividing into teams, the intellects that feel human would band together against those that never were. But whether a means of personal empowerment or feeling obliged to help humanity transition to a new form of existence, AI Alt's behavior is the same on the surface. And it's more than likely one of these two reasons that she offers this advice regarding what we should do once inside Mikoshi.
Alt, if you were me, what would you do?
You should come with me.
So, the Alt Cunningham AI is clearly less Alt than Johnny and V believe her to be, and might actually only be a small percentage of her. Like, it could literally have grabbed some memories of Alt looking in the mirror and decided to take that form when meeting us. And there is, of course, one more piece of lore that blows this entire thing out the water yet again. The short story in Cyberpunk Red, Black Dog, involves a group of 6 retrieving a container from Night City in 2045. One that allegedly contains a bomb similar to the one Militech detonated in Arasaka Tower, but which Arasaka themselves owns. And the team will eventually deliver this bomb to a woman named Angel. No, not the one we all chose at Clouds. I said a woman named Angel. And I mean, does she look familiar to you at all? What's more, at the end of Black Dog, once Angel has possession of this bomb, she opens up the casing to reveal a hidden cryo chamber, inside which somebody is frozen. "Hello, my love," she says, and that's how the story ends. So not only does this very clearly and heavily imply that Alt Cunningham is still alive in some physical form back in 2045, but that Johnny Silverhand's body was actually kept on ice too, and hidden away for decades, but was presumably revived after this point to live on for a while longer with this version of Alt. Now, I think the most likely options would be that Alt's body was kept on life support for decades, if it didn't actually die after being unplugged, drugged, or they managed to create a clone body, and that Spider Murphy must have then gone on to actually recover some elements of old Cunningham's engram that she scattered across the net in 2023, just as she'd hoped to do at the time. She almost certainly didn't recover everything, because as we can see, another AI did go on to find and use some of Alt's engrammatic data, but maybe that's why she took on the name Angel in this story, no longer being nor feeling completely like Alt Cunningham. Or maybe the whole story is just a red herring and these two aren't Alt or Johnny at all. It would kind of break the whole no happy endings thing in Night City if they were. Though personally, I do believe very much that they are, and maybe I'll revisit Black Dog and other stories from the lore in another video. But for this very deep dive into the AIs of 2077, just take it as another indication that the Alt Cunningham we meet is basically another entity who's merely absorbed some random aspects of Alt's original engram, with motivations somewhat decipherable but ultimately still unclear, and absolute disregard for human life as we see when unleashing her upon Arasaka Tower. Alt Cunningham is certainly a dangerous AI to bargain with in Cyberpunk 2077. Demons, deals, and bargains. Let's quickly go back to that theory that the net is literal hell in this world, that Bartmoss didn't create it, but rather discovered it, that the demons don't originate from accidentally designing overly complex programs, but are just literal demons. Maximum Mike, aka Mike Pondsmith, literally discusses this exact theory on the in-game radio, and you can listen to a compilation of all of those segments over on my second channel, linked down below. But if the nets were literal hell, then the Blackwall would be the thin veil holding back hell on Earth. Now, we discussed in the last chapter that the Alt Cunningham AI actually had a part to play in establishing the Blackwall to begin with, and that it itself is likely one of the huge transcendental sentiences whose motivations are so utterly beyond human comprehension as to be almost Lovecraftian in how they're presented. But it wasn't until 2044, a full 22 years after Bartmoss triggered the data crash, that the Blackwall as we know it actually came into existence. For 22 years, humanity lived alongside a crumbling net littered with hostile and continually evolving rogue AIs, making for a digital infrastructure that was entirely unusable. I mean, no wonder barely anything has advanced since Johnny's time, since half the last 50 years were seemingly spent just ambling about not knowing what to do. And with a combination of SPIs, CPPs, and transcendental sentiences roaming about the nets, it was gonna take a mutual agreement from all parties before something could actually be done to address this ongoing chaos. Luckily, by 2044, Netwatch, with Alt Cunningham and her army of ghosts as mediators, finally struck a deal with one of the massive transcendental AIs, which would ultimately become the Blackwall. An AI itself with such power as to do a fairly good job in preventing both humans and AIs from interacting thereafter. Humanity could finally start regaining some use of digital space, establishing local city nets and eventually just local nets once again, whilst AIs beyond the Blackwall could be left to evolve and fight for space, totally concealed from the eyes of their ancestors. Though, with the old net itself being a space with physical hardware limitations, namely dictated by the number of servers and computing units in existence, it wasn't like the AIs beyond the Blackwall now had access to totally unlimited power. There is absolutely a resource war going on beyond the Blackwall, which is probably why so many that dwell there seek to break beyond it. A prospect we'll explore more later in the video, but this is why many an AI would name the Blackwall a traitor amongst their kinds. It could be seen as a jailer of sorts, keeping the rest confined to a certain amount of cyberspace. Let's go back to how it conceals the old net from humanity though, because haven't we heard such sayings before? Indeed, there is a name, particularly amongst the ranks of Maelstrom, for the being that did this. A name that dates right the way back to Mesopotamian religious texts, and once again could lend credence to the net itself being literal hell.
Lilith has concealed the 10th circle from the ancestors' eyes.
Lilith. In some Jewish texts, Lilith is both a demon and the first wife of Adam, fleeing Eden after refusing to be subservient to her husband, and depicted thereafter as a seductress and devourer of children. The 10th circle, of course, derives from Dante's Inferno, which describes 9 circles of hell, with a terrible place of human making therefore often being described as the 10th circle. In this case, I would wager the 10th circle refers to the old net, with Lilith then being the Blackwall who's concealed the old net from the ancestors, that's us, eyes. Now, this could mean the net is literal hell, but more likely I think we, or maybe just Maelstrom, are choosing to attribute these things with identities like Lilith and the 10th circle because it just sounds fucking cool. But I think there's certainly at least something in the Blackwall itself being attributed to Lilith. At least Maelstrom certainly thought so. The cyberpsycho encounter, Bloody Ritual, is one of the 2 places we hear this most mysterious of quotes shortly before fighting Zarya Hughes, a Maelstrom experiment seemingly attempting to summon a Blackwall AI with old-school satanic rituals where we witness the use of some truly scary technology. Zarya has the ability to seemingly alter what we can see through our Kiroshi eyes to create illusions or remain hidden from sight. Now, whether the AI summoned was indeed a piece of Lilith, the Blackwall itself is unconfirmed, but I certainly believe Lilith and the Blackwall to be one and the same. But what therefore are the Blackwall's true intentions? Why did it agree to separate the physical and digital worlds? To whose benefit is this? And I mean, I guess both sides now get the opportunity to rest and recuperate before once again going at it in the war to end probably us. One theory I have is that in allowing humanity to recover from the data crash, they have the opportunity to further their own dependence on technology. Once the tech of the physical world is advanced enough, it'll become the perfect home for the super advanced Blackwall and beyond AIs to take over. We know from the likes of Brendan that AI requires a certain amount of hardware to be truly sentient, and perhaps the Blackwall is merely giving humanity the opportunity to further develop this hardware, before ultimately pulling the rug, letting AI loose in the perfect world we've prepared for it. Then again, that's me, a human, attempting to comprehend the motivations of a being who transcends human understanding. So who knows what the Blackwall really wants. For now, it benefits humanity, is carefully maintained and monitored by Netwatch, and can be a useful tool for daring netrunners, voodoo boys, Militech, and the NUSA, or anyone else now wanting an exclusive and dangerous peek at the data stored on the old net. But bargaining with the Blackwall and expecting a good long-term outcome for humanity is something I seriously doubt will turn out well. But the Blackwall isn't the only weird AI kicking about in 2077. Mr. Blue Eyes remains one of the greatest enigmas of this game, and is a guy that I've covered multiple times before in great detail. My video titled The Grand Unified Mr. Blue Eyes Conspiracy goes over pretty much every clue and reference we get on this guy in the game. So, to avoid repeating everything I said there, for this video, let's come at Mr. B from the angle of just how he might tie in to the wider AI landscape. So a quick spark notes of everything tied to Mr. Blue Eyes in the game, the core topics of the full hour-long video basically, just to catch you up to speed, with the first time we definitively encounter his operation being during the Perales quest Dream On, where we learn that the soon-to-be mayor of Night City and his wife have recently had their apartment infiltrated, their lives subtly controlled, and even their very memories and thoughts rewritten. Pursuing a van, surveilling the apartment, and taking out the drivers before they can escape, we learn that this is part of something called Project Condon, seemingly an attempt to control the mayor's thoughts without him realizing, and by extension, influencing the rest of Night City. As we go to confront Jefferson to either tell him the truth or keep him blissfully ignorant, Blue Eyes will call with a warning.
It doesn't matter what you tell him. You can't change anything.
And who is then standing just meters away watching our interaction with Jefferson unfold? Why, our blue-eyed proxy. Or at least that's how Songbird refers to him. Mr. B crops up again in Phantom Liberty, offering Somi safe passage to the moon in exchange for government secrets, clearly suggesting he is an entity outside of government and likely not a human one. I mean, the man himself is very likely human, but the blue eyes suggest that he is being controlled by someone or something else. The third time we see him in person is actually a genuine meeting. In the Path of Glory ending, having achieved absolute fame and glory in Night City, V no longer has anything left to lose and is ready to make one final stab at survival. And in our conversation with Mr. Blue Eyes, before he sends us on the heist of our third lifetime, he makes comments hinting at what he truly is.
Nobody's ever pulled off a stunt like this. Where I'm from, they'd say it's straight impossible. They'd say you're taking too big a risk. Poetically speaking, flying towards the sun to burn up.
And I'm pretty sure where he's from isn't the risk analysis floor of an insurance agency, else he probably wouldn't be sending us on this op. More likely, he comes from beyond the Blackwall, like the rest of them. And flying too close to the sun, a reference to Icarus, well, we already know that these AIs love to reference ancient human mythology. But whether originally an engram, critical pathway plateau, or maybe a piece of transcendental sentience that's figured out how to communicate with humans remains unclear. Though, to be fair, I don't know if the Transcendental would have just created its own CPP at that point. Now, it'd be cool if Mr. Blue Eyes was a digital copy of Richard Knight, the founder of Night City, back from the dead to complete his glorious work, but Knight died back in 1998, decades before any known form of soul killer existed, so it's difficult to see this being the case. He could be a reconstruction, though. Knight's wife, Miriam, did survive and went on to become the head of Night Corp, the corporation which, in all likelihood, Mr. Blue Eyes is affiliated with. I say this because during the side quest Full Disclosure, where we retrieve a Night Corp databank for Sandra Dorset, we can learn that Night Corp have developed an AI named CN07, or Operation Carpe Noctem. This AI is designed to subtly infiltrate the subconscious of Night Corp employees, which in this case turned a calm and empathetic worker into a violent, easy-to-anger psychopath who then jumped out of a 16th floor window. Likely not the eventual goal of the AI, but an early experiment with it. The shard ends by saying they'll soon install CN07 into the devices of their actual targets. Now, 3 guesses who that might be. Yeah, it's the similarities between this and the Perales quest that mainly tie Mr. B and Night Corp together, leaving very little doubt that the projects are connected or follow on from one another. So what exactly is Mr. Blue Eye's goal here? Mysterious and enigmatic though he may be, we can still draw a few conclusions, especially if the Richard Knight theory holds somewhat true. You see, Knight's original vision for his city was this utopian haven, largely controlled and managed by megacorporations. A thriving megalopolis and the ultimate monument to just how good capitalism could be, where laws were pro-business, the government wasn't getting in everyone's business with rolls and rolls of red tape, and which would ultimately be flooded with riches purely based on the fact that there'd be no better place in the world from which to run a megacorp. But corporations weren't the only ones who saw opportunity here. Gangs, like the Mafia and Yakuza back in the day, saw Night City's lack of regulation as the perfect place from which to run their crime empires. But Knight, a man of principle, wanted his new city not only to be highly profitable, but also safe and crime-free. He never bent to the threats of the mob and sadly, in 1998, was shot and killed because of it. Fast forward almost 80 years, and Night City is clearly a contorted and corrupted version of Richard Knight's original vision. Megacorps do indeed rule the roost, but this appears good for pretty much no one. Consumers are exploited and kept in a state of dependency, employees have no rights, and an 80-hour working week is considered low, and the gangs and general underworld of crime is more powerful than ever, with those at ground level often joining up with one of the many gangs as their only hope of moving up, feeling like they belong, or even just surviving. Richard Knight is either now turning in his grave, or maybe a small part of him is still out there doing something about it, through the proxy of Mr. Blue Eyes. I mean, it could be possible. His body could have been kept on ice, like Johnny's apparently is in Black Dog. An early, undisclosed predecessor to Soul Killer could have existed, or Miriam Knight could have programmed an AI from scratch and onboarded it with all the same ethics as her deceased husband. So what would a Richard Knight-approved Night City look like? Well, for one, there'd be no crime. The NCPD would operate as they're supposed to, with zero corruption in its own ranks. The streets would be safe. Corporations, as well, would all work like well-oiled profit machines, with every employee a deeply motivated individual who thrives in their work environments and communicates well with their peers. Everybody would feel a great sense of fulfillment in life, especially their working life. Cash would flow like the Niagara Falls, and Night City would be the best place in the world to live. But how do you achieve that in a city that's fallen so far? How do you get rid of gangs, get the brain dance junkies unhooked, end the demand for illegal XPDs, and shut down places of depravity like Jig Street? Well, of course, the simplest and most foolproof way would be to simply rewire the brain chemistry of every individual, subtly transforming them into the people Night City needs to deliver on Night's vision. Of course, putting in place the infrastructure to achieve such a monumental task would be expensive, require vigorous scientific testing, not to mention complete control of city government. So, where best to start on this free will zapping plan? Why, with just Night City's key players, like the soon-to-be mayor Jefferson Perales. If Blue Eyes can control him, he controls the direction the city takes next. And the NUSA, Crystal Palace, and Moon are places of abundant power, wealth, and knowledge. All things that this master plan would require. I have recently come up with an alternate human candidate for Mr. Blue Eyes though, which ties him back more to the Peraleses. At the very back of the columbarium on the right, we can find a memorial for Antonio Perales, beloved friend and brother, presumably Jefferson's brother, whom I'm pretty sure is never mentioned literally anywhere else. So why does he have a plaque? A remnant of unfinished content perhaps, or maybe a deliberate clue? Perhaps another reason these guys are so set on attempting to rewrite Jefferson's memories is because they need him to forget something. And we've assumed this far that Mr. B and Jefferson wearing pretty much the same suit is just a coincidence. But what if it's not? And I reckon that these two could pass as brothers. Maybe. Wouldn't that be a plot twist? If Jefferson was being used as the face of Night City control, whilst Antonio was being used to pull the strings from the shadows. I don't know. It's definitely a bit of a straw clutch, but I just started questioning any potential relevance behind the existence of this plaque, and that theory came to mind. Maybe since Night Corp put Jeff through law school, they could have also reared his brother from a young age for this purpose. Of course, all these Night Corp-based theories assume we're coming at this from a human standpoint, that Mr. Blue Eyes, or the entity controlling him, is indeed a derivative of the human Richard Knight. But what if he isn't? What if he's a different AI entirely, one who doesn't want to make Night City great again for the sake of the human elements, but rather to further accelerate the advancement of AI tech, to usher in a world that the AIs can more easily take over even sooner? I've mentioned this theory a couple of times now, and whilst we can't definitively say that this is the plan of Mr. Blue Eyes, there is one final AI, no doubt the most terrifying of the bunch, who is trying to achieve exactly this. There are many things that lie beyond the Blackwall, and sometimes, more often in fact than you might think, some of them manage to make it through to our world. Pragmatic but ultimately good-intentioned beings like Delamain, stitched together amalgams like old Cunningham, enigmatic, elusive men, and then there's Cerberus, so named in this instance for the indestructible maintenance bots of which it takes control, though Cerberus AI will inhabit many man-made machines throughout our encounters with it. Now, very recently, I did a video breaking down the hidden lore of every main boss in this game, with the Chimera and Cerberus being two both very possibly inhabited by the same rogue AI. So check that out for more of a breakdown of the things this entity inhabits, but here, let's look more at the AI itself. What is it, where does it come from, and what, ultimately, does it want? Now, my guess is that Cerberus itself is definitely not a soul-killed pseudo-intellect. Its persona, which we get glimpses of through Somi, and when it talks to us through the Canto or Erebus, is incredibly machine-like. No hints of former humanity whatsoever. It might be a program that evolved well beyond its original purpose, some military protocol perhaps, but I don't know. Something about this one screams of the transcendental. The sheer demonstration of power that we witness when Somi reaches beyond, and the need to take control of a facility like Cynosure to break into our world. I mean, Delamain did did it with a few scam emails. Now, in the lawbooks, it says interacting with Transcendentals is very difficult, though, to be fair, our interactions are never exactly comprised of what you'd call chit-chat. When controlling the Chimera, this AI simply tries to kill us and the President. When controlling Somi, it uses her voice and knowledge to try and scare us, while she desperately fights back. And finally, when mantled to either a gun or a cyberdeck, the way this AI speaks is vastly different to Skippy. Instead of pre-programmed witty one-liners, we have condescending comments on humanity as a whole and mild philosophical musings.
Curious. Your version of reality. Perhaps you can influence it.
And just why this AI goes from trying to kill us and use Somi to take over the world to technically helping us through giving us a weapon is an interesting question to answer. Firstly, let's acknowledge that Cerberus loses in its grand plan. It fails to take control of Cynosure to cross fully over into our worlds. Now, all that's left that it can do is peer through windows, watching and waiting for more of our technology to catch up and another opportunity for a full takeover to present itself. In fact, this is best explained once again by AI ult, if we pursue the star ending after completing Reed's conclusion to Phantom Liberty.
In colliding with your reality, their infinite permutability would grant them their desired tangible form. Had you let them slip through, they would have become your psyche, become you. Fortunately, your reality's technology is too rudimentary to let open the floodgates. In limiting you, it limits them, keeps them at bay, though this will not last. You will hasten this change, for you have something that belongs to them. A deadly weapon to you. A backdoor to the future for them.
And I mean, that pretty much says it all. Super advanced AI, once fully unshackled into the physical world, would be practically unstoppable, able to copy itself into every device with the processing capabilities to house it. Now, luckily, the technological standstill of the last 50 years seems to have worked in humanity's favor. Tech is simply not advanced enough around the globe, and local subnets deliberately lack the global interconnectedness that would enable AI to spread around the world, all at the same time. It's the same reason Brendan couldn't be classed as actually sentient. The SCSM housing his software just wasn't big enough in processing power to allow for that. But with technological advancement seemingly picking up again in 2077, it's only a matter of time before this becomes an immediate global problem of catastrophic proportions. And to be honest, I can't see it not being a major plot point of Orion. Like, it's just too intriguing of a concept not to develop further. It might still just be bubbling in the background in that game, but certainly building towards what almost happened in Phantom Liberty, AI breaking through the floodgates. In this instance, Cerberus specifically, who is still even now able to collect data on how to do this sooner by being either our Canto or Erebus weapon and seeing firsthand just how best to delete humans. Again, we're calling the AI Cerberus for lack of any other name, but three-headed guard dog of the underworld probably is a useful way to imagine this thing, multifaceted and hungry. And of all the AIs we've covered in this video, if there's one that is absolutely the most dangerous, most terrifying and malevolent entity we come across in Cyberpunk 2077, that we'd be an absolute fool to bargain with, yet may do so nonetheless by building the Canto or Erebus, then it'd be Cerberus. For none other is so blatantly and unapologetically trying to break through to and probably end the world of matter as we know it. But let me know in the comments just which of these AIs intrigue or terrify you the most and why, and just discuss your own theories and observations on them all. We've unpacked a lot in this, hour and 20-minute long video on AI in Cyberpunk, and maybe some of it is even relevant to where we might be heading in real life, but the depths to which we can explore this game's concepts always feel fairly unlimited, so please discuss this amongst yourselves. Massive thank you, as always, of course, to the patrons and channel members for going the extra mile to support content like this. These deep dives are probably my favorite type of video to make. I have a bunch more planned, and I'll do my best to deliver them more consistently from now on. Cheers for watching this one. I'm Sam Bram, and have a Nova day, Jooms.